Over the next few videos I plan to focus on the claims being made by those who describe themselves as climate change skeptics. I found a video made by a guy called Baxter, who usually deals with end times prophecy. Make of that what you will. But in this case he makes several claims about climate change which I will address. Here he is.
Well, the globalists are pushing ahead with all their might toward a global climate change agreement. It's really, we need to call it what it is. It's a global warming agreement. Nevertheless, they like to call it climate change because there's not been any global warming for the last 18 years, and that particular name is becoming somewhat laughable, and so they've switched to climate change, whatever that means. I would love to hear a definition on climate change. Colder in the night than in the morning, or colder in the spring than it is in the summer, or warmer in the summer than it is in the fall. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, this borders on the absurd.
I think it's absurd that a guy who purports to know what he's talking about hasn't read up on the basics of what the word climate means. Climate is defined as how the atmosphere behaves over relatively long periods of time, whereas Mr. Baxter is describing weather and seasonal variation. Climate change encompasses global warming, but to limit the description to global warming alone would be to exclude all of the other stuff going on. Even if the average global temperature had not been rising for the last 18 years, which it has, that would not mean that the climate isn't changing. Climate change is measured in 20 to 30-year blocks, and the average global temperature was certainly cooler than now 20 or 30 years ago. As for the globalists, whoever exactly they are supposed to be, the science is a separate issue.
Now all of a sudden, they're propagandizing everything, trying to make us think that we've moved into this new dangerous era being brought on by man-made global warming, but there's not been any global warming. And furthermore, there's no proof. There's no proof.
Keep digging.
That mankind is contributing to global warming, and furthermore, there's no proof that to warm up a degree or two would hurt us. As a matter of fact, it's possible that it would help us. It would give us a little bit longer growing season. It would make more food available. It would make climates more livable. And yet, we're supposed to panic.
No sane person encourages people to panic. The sensible thing to do would be to fact-check the claims being made. Climatology is a complicated subject which requires some serious study before it is dismissed. Carbon dioxide is one of several greenhouse gases. The greenhouse analogy is imperfect though, because if a planet is compared with a greenhouse, you can go outside of one where it is cooler, but that doesn't work for the planet. Then there is the fact that humans have been burning fossil fuels at an increasing rate since the Industrial Revolution. Nature, using photosynthesizing plants and algae, combined with sedimentation and plate tectonics, stored a lot of that ancient atmospheric carbon in the Earth's crust. It took millions of years to do this, during which time life evolved and adapted to the slowly changing environment. The important thing to keep in mind is that we are undoing a lot of that in a tiny fraction of those millions of years, which means that many species will be unable to relocate or evolve quickly enough to the changing environment. And we are one of them. So, with this in mind, we're scoring an own goal or shooting ourselves in the foot. And people like Mr. Baxter are unwittingly encouraging us along this destructive trajectory. As for the idea that global warming is a good thing, that's all very well for those of us who live in northern temperate climates, but not so good for Africans, Australians, Brazilians, and anyone who is already finding it uncomfortably hot. In this next clip, Mr. Baxter is railing against the powers that be in light of the firing of French weatherman Philippe Verdier, who apparently contravened his employment contract by using his status as a TV personality to promote his book.
You want to lose your job? Challenge climate change. Some people are even proposing making it a crime. I'm serious. If you challenge climate change. Some people have even decided perhaps it's a mental disorder. Really? Have we lost our minds?
That's an open question, but I couldn't help noticing that Mr. Baxter's claims are unsubstantiated. No doubt there are some who equate climate change denial with mental disabilities, but that does not mean that it is the norm or even correct.
Do you remember before the big climate change conference in Copenhagen back in 2009? Remember 3 weeks before that someone hacked into the International Climate Organization?
Yes, it was the Climate Change Research Unit of the University of East Anglia.
And published a bunch of emails that was between the leading climate change scientists at the United Nations.
Mr. Baxter seems to have his wires crossed here. The hacking occurred shortly before the United Nations conference, but the emails were between climatologists at the University of East Anglia.
Remember when they had such phrases in there, "We must hide the decline"?
Yes, but I also remember how the decline was not referring to average global temperature, contrary to what was reported by many bloggers and news outlets. It's easy to cherry-pick a phrase and ignore the wider context. I don't have time to go into further detail here and now. Potholer 54 has already addressed this, and I encourage any of you who wish to find out more to watch video number 6 in his excellent series on climate change.
I mean, I was listening to the Democratic presidential debate the other night, and all of them were climate change, climate change, climate change. And I just wish for a moment I could have stepped onto the platform and asked them, do any of you know that Vikings sailed through the northern straits 1,000 years ago, which they cannot do now? And then just be silent and wait for a pin to drop, and then watch for the spin to begin.
No spin is required. The difference between summer and winter has varied for a very long time. The Vikings were able to sail as far north as Ellesmere Island. This would have been during what is referred to as the medieval warm period. Roald Amundsen, a fellow Norwegian, successfully sailed the Northwest Passage between 1903 and 1906. Since then, the Arctic sea ice has been melting with increasing rapidity, and in August 2007, it was possible to sail the same route without an icebreaker. We have accurate data of the Arctic sea ice volume since 1979, which shows clearly that the September average is now less than half what it was 36 years ago. So Mr. Baxter is apparently unaware of the fact that we can sail through the Northwest Passage during late summer in the 21st century. Having watched, read and listened to many of the arguments put forward by climate change deniers recently, I am alarmed by how many of them there are. Also, in America at least, there is a massive political polarization where the climate change supporter and denier boundary correlates closely with the liberal-conservative divide. Often, to me at least, it seems that the future well-being of our species and the health of the ecosystems upon which we depend are lost in political rhetoric.